We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to AVRant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H.
Tate. Tate first wanted to let us know that he's 99% blind. You can detect light versus dark, but that is all absolutely no shapes. For the rest of his family, though, he appreciated our previous advice about what TV to buy for his living room, where all the seats are off to either side and no one is actually sitting directly in front of the TV. He found a heavily discounted LG B6 OLED, and he's very happy with that purchase. Great.
Oh, I would be happy also.
I would be. You could buy one for me while you're at it. I would have no place to put something like that, or any other display. As a matter of fact, I've got. Anyways, he's been considering a new AV receiver, and it's been a little unclear to him as to why the prices are so significantly different between some of the models. Then an X4300H, for example, is $500 more than the X3300W. Why? Even more confusing are the Marantz SR6011 versus the 7011. The features and capabilities seem almost identical. Is there some huge sonic difference to justify the SR7011's higher price? Now, I did not look up any of these receivers, but
Okay.
let me just say, as a general rule, when you go up in price on receivers, or you go up in levels of receivers, at the very bottom, you're going to see huge differences in the prices, the feature sets. The feature sets, the number of speakers, the number of watts, the number of the processing, the everything. Inputs, outputs, zones, all that stuff jumps up. But once you get towards the top end, those differences are like minimal. And a lot of times what it comes down to, and this used to happen all the time, is the top end one, or the one that's like $5,000 or $1,000 more than the one that's below it. The difference is really installer features. Not always.
That's often, yeah, sometimes.
But their installer features are like, what is that, Tom? Well, more zones, RS-232 control, IR inputs and outputs and that sort of stuff, so you can wire it directly with your infrared stuff.
The codes for something like Control 4 or Crestron or AMX are already built in.
Right. These are in dealer options, and the dealers want those options for custom installs. So they're buying something that the customer knows, and they're getting these other features. What's the other one I'm thinking? Not HDMI.
HD-based T?
That's the one, HD-based T. You see that, you're like, it's dealer. Because that no one needs that unless they have their receiver at one end of their McMansion and their display at the other end of their McMansion. So, or they have them all over the place. So a lot of times this is it. And you might look at it and say, I don't see any difference. Well, those differences are not so visible to you. There'll be some wattage increases. There may be one or two more outputs. Maybe like a 7.1 channel inputs or something like that that might show up. But as a general rule, when you get to the top here, we're looking at dealer stuff.
So these ones specifically, just to get into them, the X4300H and the X3300W have some pretty significant differences. So the $500 difference in price is pretty well justified. The easiest one to see is that the X3300W has 7 amplifiers built into it, and it tops out at 7 speakers. So the most you can do is 7.2 or 5.2.2 if you're setting it up for Atmos or DTSX. Meanwhile, the X4300H has 9 amplifiers built in, but it can process 11 speakers. So it can do a full 7.2.4 Atmos setup. That's a pretty big difference, maxing out at 5.2.2 versus 7.2.4. Also, the X4300H supports HEOS built in. That's their wireless whole house audio solution. The X3300W doesn't. The X4300H can support Oro 3D audio. It's a $200 extra fee to upgrade to that, but it's capable of doing it. The X3300W isn't. So yeah, those are some pretty major feature differences. Even just going from the 7 amps to the 9 amps, you can kind of understand where the $500 price gap came in. But they use the same level of Odyssey multi-Q XT32 with sub EQ HT. So that if that's the key feature you're focusing in on, then
that's the other thing too. You may a lot of times these differences in prices are for things you don't care about.
Exactly.
And
if you're not going to run 9
valid.
or 11 speakers, then if you know you're going to stop at 7, then For sure.
Yeah.
And then over on the Marantz side, I agree. The SR6011 and 7011 feature sets are really close. Both have 9 amps built in. Both can process 11 speakers. Both have multi-Q XT32 with sub-EQ HT. Here are the differences. The 7011, again, has Heos built in. The 6011 doesn't. The 7011 can do Oro 3D if you want to pay the $200 upgrade fee. The 6011 cannot. And the 7011 has a full display on its front panel. It's hidden behind a flap, but it has a full display. The 6011 only has the small little porthole display. That bothers some people. And then there's a slight upgrade to the amount of watts in the amplifiers, but you're very much correct. To me, the SR6011, if you don't care about Heos built in and you don't care about Oro 3D, that is the value champion, because if you want 9 or 11 speaker Atmos, you can get it for the lowest price with the SR6011 from Marantz. So it's subtle differences there, but there are genuine differences that explain the difference in cost.
Right. So he's concerned about the AV receiver having enough power. He uses DefTech 8060 towers with an 8060 center. He's been using the subs that are built into the towers. They have their own amplifiers, so they can be fed by the subwoofer output of his receiver. His living room is wide open. On its own, it's about 19 feet wide and 14 feet long, but it's completely open to the left to the hallway or foyer, and completely open at the back for the dining room and kitchen. The ceilings are also 12 feet high. On the right are 3 huge windows. So it's open on the left, windows on the right. The seats are about 13 feet from the TV, so how important for him is it to have a lot of wattage from his receiver, and should that be a big concern when he's making his choice? You're sitting 13 feet from your speakers. That's literally the only thing in all of that made any difference.
Yeah, roughly 4 meters.
Watts. Yeah, that made any difference for how much watts you need. The question you have is how loud are you trying to play it? Number one. And how far away from your how efficient are your speakers, and how far away do you sit? So the 3 things that you need to know with that.
So those DefTechs are quite efficient. They're 92 dB per watt per meter.
Yeah.
So they're quite, they're not Klipsch efficient, but they're quite efficient. And you're sitting roughly 4 meters away. So take 92, subtract, let's be conservative, subtract 8 decibels from that. 4 decibels for every doubling of distance, because you're in a big room, so you're not having quite as much reflection gain as some smaller rooms. So let's subtract 8 from that, so that
86.
That,
84.
84, right? Let's call it 85 because that makes the math super easy, all right? So with 1 watt, you're getting about 85 decibels of output from where you're sitting. So for average reference volume levels, you need 1 watt per speaker. It's probably doable. Multiply that by 10 and you're up to 95 watts. So 10 watts, 95 decibels. And to hit full peak reference volume, multiply by 10 again. 100 watts will get you full peak 105 decibel peaks from your 4 meter seating distance.
They even make receivers anymore that don't go to 100
Don't go to
watts?
100 watts. Yeah, there's I've seen, some of the entry level ones are, 70 or 80 watts per channel.
But they could still put out 100 watts if they absolutely had.
All the ones you mentioned, the X3300W on up, 100 watts per channel easily, and that's sustained power.
Right.
So you only need 100 watts for a momentary peak of 105.
Right.
You need 1 watt most of the time. That's what you need. It can deliver 1 watt from any receiver.
Times 7. You need 7
Times
watts.
That's right.
If all of the speakers play at the same time.
1 watt per channel, yeah. Most of the time. And a good amount of the time you might be needing 10, even 20 watts. So.
Well, yeah. Might
But
be
yeah,
a good
for the
external amp for that.
For the higher frequencies, you're getting the direct sound. You're getting the sound that made a straight line from the speaker to you. So really all that matters is the distance. It's the bass that becomes, the wavelengths are longer than the dimensions of your room. Even in your wide open room, it's still longer than the dimensions of your room. So that's where it really matters about the volume of your room, the cubic feet of air in your room. Right. It's in the bass. You're using these built-in subwoofers that are built into the towers and your center speaker. They have their own separate amplifiers. If we were saying, would those be our number one choice for this volume of air, us being the way that we are and trying to fully pressurize things, we'd suggest larger, more powerful subwoofers. However, that still has no impact on your mid-range and treble.
Right.
Because you've got this separate amplifier powering your subs. So you are good to go as far as powering your speakers with an AV receiver.
Yes. Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.